Smash the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment if you're ready to step into a case where one mistake changed everything, because this story only gets darker from here. The rain had already washed away half the evidence by the time the police lights lit up the riverbank. Just before dawn, a jogger found a body wedged between reeds and broken branches, with a slow current bent around an old concrete bridge. The victim was a woman in her early 30s, carefully dressed, shoes still on, purse missing. The water hadn't claimed her life, but it tried its best to erase what did. By sunrise, the area was sealed off. Detectives moved with quiet urgency, boots sinking into mud, voices low, radios crackling. This was not a random place to die. The bridge sat just outside the city limits, far from cameras, far from witnesses, a place locals avoided after dark. Whoever brought her here knew exactly what they were doing. Her name was revealed by midday. Elena Ward, financial consultant, no criminal record, recently separated. According to neighbors, she had been rebuilding her life. New job, new apartment, new routines. The kind of person who wasn't supposed to end up face down in a river. The investigation moved fast. Too fast, some would later say. Detective Marcus Hale took the lead. He was respected, methodical, known for trusting his instincts. His partner, Dana Ruiz, focused on timelines and phone data, tracing Elena's last known movements. The two worked well together, but pressure came from above almost immediately. A murder like this, so close to the city, made headlines. The public wanted answers. The department wanted an arrest. By the second day, attention shifted to one person, Evan Brooks, Elena's former partner. They had separated 6 months earlier, and the split hadn't been quiet. Text messages showed arguments about money, about trust, about control. Friends described Evan as intense, private, the kind of man who didn't let go easily. He admitted they'd argued the night she disappeared, but insisted she left on her own. There were no witnesses placing Evan at the river, no DNA linking him to body, no murder weapon. But there was motive, and motive can be powerful. Detectives brought Evan in for questioning. Hours passed. He denied harming Elena, but his story shifted slightly each time he told it. Small details changed. What time she left, what she was wearing, whether she seemed upset. To the investigators, it felt like cracks forming. Outside the interrogation room, pressure mounted. Media vans lined the street. Headlines speculated. Online forums decided guilt before facts could catch up. Then came the first legal mistake. During a late-night search of Evan's apartment, officers seized his phone without a warrant. They told themselves they would sort out the paperwork later. Inside the device, they found deleted messages, angry ones, desperate ones, words that looked damning when pulled out of context. Those messages became the backbone of the case. When a judge finally signed off on the search, no one questioned the timing. No one slowed down to ask whether the evidence would hold up under scrutiny. The investigation had momentum, and momentum is hard to stop once it starts rolling. At the riverbank, forensic teams recovered fibers that could not be matched to Evan. The results were quietly filed away. A partial footprint led nowhere. The missing purse was never found. Still, prosecutors believed they had enough. They'd built a narrative, a volatile breakup, a final argument, a man who lost control. As the trial date approached, something else surfaced, something buried beneath the noise of headlines and assumptions. A storage unit registered in Elena's name, abandoned but still locked. When investigators cut the lock and lifted the door, the smell of damp cardboard filled the air. Inside were boxes of documents, neatly stacked. Financial records, names, transfers that didn't make sense. And at the bottom of one box, a handwritten note addressed to someone who was not Evan. That was the moment the case shifted. Because what they found inside that unit suggested Elena had been hiding something far more dangerous than a broken relationship, and the legal mistakes made early in the investigation were about to come back and change the trial forever. The storage unit changed the direction of the case, but not in the way anyone expected. When detectives laid out the documents across the evidence table, the room went quiet. Bank statements showed money moving through shell accounts, routed across borders, then disappearing. Names appeared again and again, clients Elena was never supposed to handle alone. Offshore entities, private trusts, the kind of financial shadows that attracted dangerous attention. Detective Ruiz felt a chill crawl up her spine. Elena hadn't just been rebuilding her life. She had been sitting on something explosive. The handwritten note made it worse. It wasn't long, just a few lines, but the tone was unmistakable. Fear wrapped in urgency. Elena warned the recipient that she had proof, that if anything happened to her, certain files would expose everything. The note ended with a name that no one in the room recognized. Not Evan. Ruiz pushed to expand the investigation, but by then, the case had its gravity. Prosecutors had already committed Evan Brooks as the killer. Pulling back now would look like weakness. Worse, it would invite questions about how the investigation had been handled, and those questions were dangerous. The second legal mistake came quietly. The prosecution disclosed only part of the storage unit evidence to the defense. The financial records were summarized, not fully shared. The handwritten note was labeled inconclusive and set aside, technically disclosed, but buried so deeply it might as well not exist. Evan's attorney, Claire Donnelly, sensed something was wrong from the start. She had defended enough people to recognize when a case leaned too heavily on narrative instead of proof. No DNA, no witnesses, no weapon, just a story built on emotion and assumption. In court, prosecutors painted Evan as possessive, unstable, driven by jealousy. They projected text messages onto large screens, letting jurors read raw words stripped of context. Each message landed like a small blow. Claire objected repeatedly. Some messages were taken from the illegally seized phone. Others were cherry-picked, lacking replies that softened their meaning. The judge sustained some objections, overruled others. The jury watched everything. Outside the courtroom, the media framed the trial as open and shut. A jealous ex, a dead woman, justice finally catching up. Inside, the tension grew. During cross-examination, Claire pressed Detective Hale about the phone seizure. Hale hesitated. His answer was careful, rehearsed, but the timeline didn't add up. Claire circled back again and again until the judge intervened. The damage was done. One juror scribbled something into a notebook. Behind the scenes, Ruiz uncovered more. Elena had met with someone 2 nights before her death, a man using a false name, traced to a consulting firm that existed only on paper. Security footage from a cafe showed them sitting close, heads bowed, tension visible even without sound. Ruiz brought this to Hale. He didn't look relieved. He looked trapped. The department had already poured resources into the prosecution. Admitting tunnel vision now would unravel everything. Careers, reputations, trust. The third legal mistake wasn't procedural. It was human. They chose silence. As the trial entered its final week, a key witness for the prosecution took the stand. Elena's neighbor, who claimed to hear shouting the night she disappeared. Under cross-examination, the witness admitted they hadn't actually seen Evan, only assumed the voice was his. Assumed. The word echoed in the courtroom. Claire seized a moment, tying assumptions together like loose threads. No one saw Evan at the river. No physical evidence placed him there. The state was asking the jury to fill gaps with fear. Still, fear is persuasive. During closing arguments, the prosecution dismissed the financial angle as a distraction. This is about domestic violence, they said, about a man who couldn't let go. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the 4th morning, before the verdict was read, Claire received an anonymous envelope slipped under her office door. Inside was a flash drive and a single typed sentence. They didn't show you everything. When Claire plugged in the drive, her breath caught. It contained files pulled directly from Elena's storage unit. Files the prosecution had never fully disclosed. And among them was a transaction time-stamped just hours before Elena died, linked to the same name from a handwritten note. A name connected to someone who had far more to lose than Evan Brooks. But the jury was already filing back into the courtroom, and the verdict was about to be read. The courtroom was silent as the jury returned. Evan Brooks stood rigid beside his attorney, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Across the room, Elena's family stared forward, grief hardened into expectation. The foreperson rose. Guilty. The word landed like a final blow. Evan didn't react at first. It was as if his mind refused to accept the sound. Then his shoulders sagged just slightly, the weight of the sentence already pressing down. The judge thanked the jury, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge that the case they had decided was built on fractures. Claire Donnelly stood frozen. The flash drive sat in her bag, heavy as a brick, evidence that could have changed everything, discovered minutes too late. Evan was sentenced to life. The media moved on within days. Another conviction, another headline, another story neatly wrapped. But Claire didn't let it go. She filed an emergency motion alleging prosecutorial misconduct and failure to disclose exculpatory evidence. The state fought back hard, calling the new material relevant and speculative. Appeals courts are not designed for quick justice, and months turn into years. Behind prison walls, Evan aged rapidly. His appeal stalled. His name faded, until Detective Ruiz resurfaced. The department quietly reassigned her after she refused to drop questions about Elena's finances. But distance gave her freedom. She kept digging off the clock, following money trails that led across borders and back again. Eventually, the name from a handwritten note reappeared, this time attached to a real person, a financial fixer with deep political connections and a history of making problems disappear. Elena had been preparing to expose him. The night she died, he was in the city, phone metadata placed in blocks from the river. The final legal mistake revealed itself when it was too late to ignore. Emails surfaced showing that the prosecution had been aware of this individual during the trial. Not in detail, but enough to know the financial angle mattered. Enough to know the storage unit evidence should have been fully disclosed. Enough to know they chose a simpler story instead. Public pressure mounted once the documents leaked. News outlets that once celebrated the conviction now questioned it. Editorials used words like tunnel vision and systemic failure. An independent review was ordered. Evan Brooks walked out of prison 11 years after he entered it. No apology followed. No admission of wrongdoing. Just a statement that the conviction had been vacated. In the interest of justice, the man who truly benefited from Elena's silence was never charged. By the time investigators moved in his direction, accounts were empty, passports changed, trails cold. Elena's murder remains officially unsolved. Claire keeps the handwritten note framed in her office, not as a victory, but as a warning. Ruiz left law enforcement entirely, teaching future investigators how easily cases can derail when certainty replaces curiosity. As for Evan, he lives quietly now, carrying a truth no verdict can erase. That freedom returned too late still costs everything. They said the jury decided beyond reasonable doubt. But doubt was there all along. It was simply ignored. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss it.